Welcome to InstantGMP. The staff at InstantGMP prepared the CGMP compliance series of presentations to focus on good manufacturing practices and CGMP compliance for manufacturing of FDA-regulated products. These are brought to you by our quality and manufacturing experts in the hope that it will help you prepare for CGMP compliance in your shop. This presentation will address the documentation of CGMP procedures. One of the most common failures cited by FDA inspectors in warning letters is lack of adequate documentation. The FDA wants to see details on how firms make and keep written procedures for specifications, quality control operations, master manufacturing records, returned goods, and equipment. The FDA cited manufacturers for failing to provide written documentation that specifications were set and that the testing was completed before using a component or ingredient in a batch. In many cases, there were no written master manufacturing records, MMRs, for each unique formulation of dietary supplements, or the batch production records did not follow the master manufacturing record. The FDA expects documentation to show that batches were properly made and that the quality control personnel performed their review and disposition of products at the time of manufacturing. There are many CGMP requirements for making and distributing good quality dietary supplement products. It would be impossible to stay in compliance if there were no written documentation and proof that each of the CGMP requirements were met. The production and quality staff can be easily trained and can stay in compliance if there are written procedures for them to read when they first start the job and that they can refer back to when they need a refresher. Without written procedures, the staff may not remember the correct way to do things, or they may do the steps differently over time. Written procedures enforce uniformity and quality, which is what consumers deserve and that the FDA mandates. If adulteration of the dietary supplement occurs, the records will show the source of the material so that its use can be stopped. The FDA wants records that will show what is to be manufactured and whether the controls for identity, purity, strength, composition, and limits on contaminants to prevent adulteration were effective. They also want records that will show whether and what deviations from control processes occurred and what corrective actions were taken to assure that the corrections were effective. Records are needed to show whether batches of products with deviations should be recalled from the market. Good documentation ensures that CGMPs are being followed and you are making a quality product. In the FDA's mind, if it wasn't documented, it wasn't done. How do you improve compliance? Our first rule of CGMP compliance is document what you do and do what you document. The FDA guidance documents on CGMP regulations has very detailed instructions on compliance requirements. You are free to interpret the guidance and write up your own processes. Just make sure you document how you will do each of the major functions of CGMP manufacturing. Once you have documented your processes as standard operating procedures, then follow them each time. The minimum manufacturing practices necessary to ensure that regulated products are manufactured, packaged, labeled, or held in a manner that will ensure the quality of the final product include record keeping. Records are required for personnel, sanitation, calibration of instruments and controls, calibration, inspection, or checks of automated mechanical or electrical equipment, maintaining, cleaning, and sanitizing equipment and utensils and other contact services, water used that may become a component of a product, and for production and processes controls. The FDA also spells out that records are needed for quality control, components, packaging labels, and product received for packaging and labeling, master manufacturing and batch production, laboratory operations, manufacturing operations, packaging and labeling operations, holding and distributing operations, returned goods, and for product complaints. The FDA inspection reports and warning letters are published and are available for review at the FDA website. We have selected out the issues that are most commonly cited by FDA inspectors: inadequate documentation of CGMP procedures, master manufacturing records were not created, batch production records had inadequate information or did not follow the master, no documentation that specifications were set, no in-process control because of inadequate in-process specifications, deviations occurred without corrective action or documentation, suppliers and vendors were not qualified. We'll go into more detail on each of these issues and provide some suggestions on how you can avoid these pitfalls. Each master manufacturing record, MMR, needs to include a bill of materials or a complete list of components and dietary ingredients that will go into the product. This will keep employees from adjusting the amounts of ingredients from memory or based upon ratios learned from other employees. Each MMR should also include the weight or measure of each component to be used, the identity and weight or measure of each dietary ingredient, a statement of theoretical yield at each step of the manufacturing process where control is needed to ensure quality, the expected yield when you finish manufacturing the dietary supplement, written instructions, including specifications for each point, step, or stage in the manufacturing process where control is necessary to ensure quality, procedures for sampling, written instructions for manual operations where one person is to add a component and whether another person is to verify the addition. MMR should specify the equipment to be used and require that equipment cleaning is checked to make sure its use will not result in the contamination of the dietary supplement. According to CGMP requirements, your BPR must include the following information: the identity of the equipment and processing lines used in producing the batch, the date and time of the maintenance, cleaning, and sanitizing of the equipment and processing lines used in producing the batch or a cross-reference to records such as individual equipment logs, the identity and weight or measure of each component and dietary ingredient used in the batch, a statement of the actual yield and a statement of the percent of theoretical yield at appropriate phases of processing, documentation that the finished dietary supplement meets its specification. Each batch record must have a unique number assigned to it, corresponding to a unique instance of producing a specific batch of a specific product. The batch production record must include real-time documentation of steps performed. This includes the initials of the person responsible for weighing or measuring each component used in the batch, the initials of the person responsible for verifying the weighing step, the initials of the operator adding the component to the batch, and the initials of the verifier who witnessed the addition step. Batch records must have documentation of packaging and labeling operations, including the unique identifier that is assigned to packaging and labels used, and the quantity of the packaging and labels used. The FDA requires batch records have documentation that quality assurance personnel reviewed and determined the disposition of the BPR. This includes documentation of approval or rejection of materials, reprocessing or repackaging, and final approval and release for distribution or rejection of the batch. Batch production records should show the actual results obtained during monitoring or tableting or encapsulating operations and inspections of the final product. This includes documentation of any instance of dented, discolored, or possibly adulterated samples. Regulations require reference of correct labeling of the product to be a part of the BPR, including samples of any labels from the corresponding batch-specific labels in order to assure accuracy. Manufacturing processes for tablets and capsules should include the use of filters, strainers, traps, magnets, electronic metal detectors, or any other comparable means of preventing the inclusion of foreign materials from equipment or the environment in the product. You will need to establish specifications for components, in-process production, labels and packaging, the finished batch of product that you receive from a supplier for packaging and labeling, and the packaging and labeling for the finished packaged and labeled product. You must monitor the in-process points, steps, or stages where control is necessary to ensure the quality of the finished batch of the dietary supplement. This is done to determine whether the in-process specifications are met and to detect any deviation or unanticipated occurrence that may result in a failure to meet specifications. Quality control personnel conduct all required material reviews and make all required disposition decisions. A deviation can be an unanticipated event that occurs during production and could possibly result in adulteration of a component of a dietary supplement. Pre-planned deviations from the BPR may be written and approved as well. Deviations should be noted in the batch production record along with documentation that describes either the reasoning for the planned deviation or the investigation into the root cause of an unplanned deviation. Actions taken to correct the deviation and prevent a recurrence of the deviation must be identified. This information should be recorded in a corrective and preventable action register so trends can be identified and a record of resolution programs can be kept. The quality control unit will need to evaluate whether or not the deviation resulted in or could lead to adulteration of a component, dietary supplement, packaging, or labeled to ensure the quality of the product. A batch cannot be reprocessed or approved for distribution without QAU approval of a scientifically sound plan for acceptable in-process adjustments. Regulations prohibit the use of rejected ingredients unless the quality control unit determines that in-process adjustments are possible to correct the deviations or occurrence. Others may assist quality control personnel in gathering and considering information relevant to the review and decision, but quality control personnel must approve or reject all processes, written procedures, controls, tests and examinations, and deviations. Each company must qualify all its suppliers, including those who provide components, ingredients, labels, or any other controlled item/substance involved in manufacturing. A vendor verification program should consist of periodic audits and requalification of vendor facilities to check for compliance and confirmation of the vendor's test results and certificates of analysis to ensure that the COAs can be relied upon to be accurate. Audits of suppliers are required to cover all aspects of compliance, including reviewing of specifications, procedures, and lab controls, assurance that all personnel affected by CGMP are trained, regular review of vendor documentation, confirming calibrations and recalibrations are performed by the equipment manufacturer if they are not done in-house. The FDA expects that manufacturers will exceed old regulations in preparation for meeting new regulations as they become more stringent and include more technical reviews of specifications, procedures, and lab controls. With the FDA expecting a higher compliance rate in the future and increasing technicality of inspections, a higher demand for third-party CGMP auditors in the U.S. is expected. The question is, how do we prepare for FDA inspections and ensure that your facility is CGMP compliant? Here are some tips that can help you get ready for CGMP compliance inspections. Ensure all QA/QC and all other personnel affected by CGMP regulations are familiar with the sections of 21 CFR Part 11 that apply to the department and ensure those personnel receive training on those requirements. Finally, remember that compliance can only be found through due diligence and ensuring that you are aware of their requirements and are using industry resources available to you. The retention period for controlled records should correlate with the length of time that the product complaints are likely to arise related to the manufacture of a finished product. The packaging date or date of manufacture does not necessarily indicate the availability of a dietary supplement product in the marketplace. It has no effect on the amount of time records must be kept. It is possible that such a product could be held for a period of time after manufacture before entry into the marketplace and possible consumer consumption. A more accurate time period is calculated by the date of distribution. The final rule now requires a record retention period of 2 years beyond the date of distribution of the last batch of dietary supplements associated with those records, or 1 year past the expiration date. Packagers and labelers that return the product to the manufacturer for distribution are not required to keep separate records under this subpart. Records are an indispensable component of CGMP. The records required by this final rule provide the foundation for the planning, controlling, and improvement processes that constitute a quality control system. Implementation of these processes in a manufacturing operation serves as the backbone of CGMP. If you use reduction techniques such as microfilming, you must make suitable reader and photocopying equipment readily available. If electronic means of recording or if software is used, it must meet 21 CFR Part 11 requirements for electronic documentation and electronic signatures. To make it easy for you to get into or to stay in compliance, InstantGMP has a complete set of manufacturing standard operating procedures and policies available for CGMP manufacturing. You can choose individual SOPs to supplement what they already have, or you can use the entire set as a foundation for a complete quality system. This presentation is just one of the many videos and webinars available on CGMP compliance. You can access the rest at the GMP Certification Resource Center. Thank you and have a wonderful day.